you ever wondered why some people appear to have more of a natural ability when it comes to TCGs? Well, the secret might be behind the way that they're thinking. In this video, we're going to explore the concept of laddered thinking and how this can help you improve your TCG gameplay. Welcome back to TCG Psychology, the channel where we explore psychological concepts to give you a competitive advantage. My name is Miles Castierice, and today we're exploring this concept of laddered thinking. Now, when it comes to TCG gameplay, we're often making lots and lots of decisions and trying to anticipate our opponent's plays. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, we explored the concepts of bluffing and reading our opponents to give us that advantage when we're competing in competitions. But today we're going to be looking at this idea of laddered thinking to explore, well, how do we actually need to be thinking when we're competing to be most successful? Laddered thinking itself is an idea that comes from being able to work your way up the ladder in terms of where you should be paying attention to in the middle of your gameplay to ensure that you can be most successful in that situation. So we start at the basic level of, what cards do I have? And this is often where you'll be playing if you're new to a TCG or new to TCGs in general. Now, as we move up that ladder, it's going to change slightly in terms of what do I think my opponent might have, and then we start to get into what do I think my opponent might think that I have, and so on, which we will be discussing in this video. So step one of the ladder is where you're going to be starting when you're first competing in TCGs, or potentially you're starting a new TCG and you're not sure about the cards and decks, etc. Really, you're just looking at what cards you have in your hand, what cards you want to play, and what combos you want to pull off. You're not really concerned about what your opponent is doing, but rather you've got that basic understanding of, I've got this big creature in my hand, I want to play this big creature. There's nothing wrong with being at this level, and of course we will need to start at this level, but this isn't going to see you the most success when it comes to competing in TCG tournaments. So this is where we need to start considering how to move up the ladder if you want to improve your gameplay. Now, as we start to move our thinking up the ladder one step, when we get to step two, now we're starting to think about what our opponent might have as well. So it's not just a case of, I've got these cards now, I want to play them, but now we're starting to consider, well, what cards might my opponent have that might counter what I'm trying to do? So for example, I might have that big creature in my hand that I want to play, but I might know that my opponent is running a deck that could potentially have removal spells in them. So if I play my big creature now, my opponent could potentially remove it straight away with a card from their hand. Again, we're moving on from that basic level of understanding of this is what cards I have in my hand to now, how does my cards interact with potentially what my opponent's cards might be? And this is the next step in that level in terms of thinking about how we should be playing at bigger tournaments. So at this point in the video, you might be thinking, well, I should really be thinking about what cards I have and what cards my opponent has to be successful in competitions, and you'd be right in saying that. But there's a reason I brought that up right now, because I'll bring this up again later on in the video. But for now, let's move on to step three, where we now start to think about, well, what does my opponent think that I could have in my hand? Now, this is where we start to get into that competitive level of thinking, and we start to lead our opponent into making certain assumptions about our hand. So, for example, I might have the optimal play on turn 4 for my deck, and decide to make a suboptimal play in that moment to throw our opponent off. We want them to assume that we don't actually have that optimal play at that moment, so that they waste mana or resources trying to remove any threats we currently have on the board, or they swing with their big creature first, clearing the way for us to make that play the next turn. We're trying to start to think about here now, how can I optimize the plays in my hand and make our opponent make assumptions about us? So again, this is where we want to start being able to read our opponent and how they're playing in order for us to be successful in the way that we're playing. So now we're at step 4 of the ladder, and this is where a lot of top TCG players will be spending their time in terms of their thinking when it comes to those big tournaments. And you should be striving for this step if you want to hit those top levels of TCG gameplay more consistently. And at this point in the ladder, you start to think about, what does my opponent think I think they have? So now this is where those mind games really start to come into play, and you're starting to think about, well, I know that I have this card in my hand. My opponent may think that I have this card in their hand, and I think that they have that card in their hand. So they're going to make certain assumptions based on that information. So at this point in the step ladder of thinking, I'm now trying to bait my opponent into making mistakes. So for instance, if I have that big creature on turn 4, I could potentially think that my opponent has that removal spell. So then I could then go down that suboptimal route. However, I could also think that my opponent may be thinking that I know that they have that removal spell, and I'm going to play that big creature anyway to try and lead them into making a mistake at this point. Because by me playing that big creature, and they know that I'm thinking about what they have in their hand, they might think that I have a greater threat in my hand that they might want to keep hold of that removal spell for a little bit longer to then use on something on a future turn. So at this point, we're really trying to bait our opponent into making those mistakes and hoping that they don't play that removal spell because they're anticipating that I have something stronger in my hand. This level of thinking starts to go to that next level of really how can I force those mistakes from my opponent. But you need to do it in a calculated manner, in a way that you understand the risk of what you're doing, but also the odds that you're going to pull it off and have that reward of maintaining that stronger board state in the long run. These levels of thinking are very difficult to move up and down that ladder, but it's really important for us to practice moving up and down the ladder in order for us to be successful in TCG gameplay. Now that you understand the ladder system when it comes to thinking in TCGs, you're probably wondering, well, how do I start moving between the different steps on the ladder in order to be more successful? Now, this comes with practice, but the first step is to reflect on where you currently default to in your level of thinking on that ladder system. So reflect on, do I currently sit on the step 2, step 3, and then you need to consciously raise your awareness of how to move to the next step. So when you're in your weekly gameplay, for instance, you have an idea that you're typically on step 2, and now you need to start consciously thinking, what do I need to be thinking in this moment to be on step 3 of that ladder? The other aspect to this is practicing against different opponents and being able to read what level of thinking they are on and whereabouts on the ladder they fall, so that you can adjust your gameplay in those moments and be more successful in competitions. This will enable you to make cleaner decisions in those moments and be able to think through decisions in a quicker manner, so that you can save your focus and energy for those end of round games where you might have those deeper matches with opponents and be thinking on step 4 and beyond of that ladder system. Thank you so much for watching TCG Psychology today. I hope you found this video beneficial in developing your TCG gameplay. If you know anyone that could benefit from this video, please feel free to share the video with them. Make sure to like and subscribe to the video and comment down below whereabouts on the ladder system do you feel like you currently fall and why? And until the next time, make sure you win that mind game meta.